Thank you all for being with us. Just want to quickly apologize for our brother Oladile. He's tied up with family. You know, family is the first unit we take care of, right? So he's attending to that. He may join us, but for most of the part, it's going to be myself and our lovely sister Veronica Conway. Again, the name is Nduku Mulumba. I am one of the members of the Imagine Alkebulan and a co-host with our brother Oladile. We are blessed today to be joined by Sister Veronica Conway, who's going to be talking about slaying trauma and speaking about a cutting edge approach to gaining emotional freedom. We all know we have trauma in our community and we need to free ourselves from it so that we can do the work that is needed for our liberation. Veronica, just quickly introduce yourself and then we can start our conversation, please.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so grateful to be here today with you.
Thank you.
My name is Veronica Conway, and life experience has really led me. I had a very intense, colorful childhood, which we can talk about. I was born the daughter of a former Black Panther. So before, the Black Panthers were really the vanguard of revolution in the United States. But I had a very challenging and wildly colorful, and some would say difficult, early childhood, because before age 7, I witnessed shootouts with the police. I had death threats against my life. I had to attend school under an alias. They say that there's a second civil war in this country, and that's when the police went to war with Black people. And so I'm a daughter of that war. So my father has been incarcerated for the past 50 years. He'll be getting out fairly soon, God willing. But it's been a really lifelong battle. But that battle and all of the ensuing trauma that I experienced as a child, I really began to ask a set of questions. And that is, what's the difference that makes the difference? Is freedom a function of your circumstances, or is it a function of your decisions, your mindset, your way of being? And I saw my father live like a free man, even though he was incarcerated. And I saw in my environment so many brothers and sisters walking around leading lives of mental, emotional incarceration. So that's really the early ground that set the path for me to do the work that I do today.
It's so interesting you say that, and that takes me back to something I've always said. So we were talking before about me and my hometown, right, and wanting to go back home. But every time I go back home, to especially to the rural area in the village, away from the city, they are struggling with food and all that. They have all the challenges you have in life, but they're always happy. They're always
Mhm.
happy. I say that every time I go back home. Our people are always happy, no matter what challenges they're facing. They will treat you well. They'll welcome you to their home. They'll smile with you. They'll always say hello to you. And it takes me to that statement you just made. Is freedom a function of your circumstances or a function of mindset? Please talk a little bit more about that. That is very interesting. And I think there's some some goodies in there that would help us free ourselves. I can already see that. Please.
Yeah, well, I think that it's a decision. I mean, all happiness, all sense of freedom, all sense of peace it has to do with how we assign meaning to our circumstances. So out of all of the possible meanings that we can assign to circumstances, what are the highest, most powerful meanings that make you feel more resourceful and powerful? And what are some of the ones we can all look at the same situation and assign different meanings to it? And that informs how we feel, how we show up, how we live, in our life.
So are we talking about the glass is half empty, half full approach?
It's literally, I call it struggle goggles.
Mhm.
So sometimes we can have struggle goggles, and then we see everything through the lens of our struggle, right? We
Mhm.
see everything through the lens of limitation. In my work, I deactivate the struggle goggles, and it literally impacts what you filter for, because we collect evidence. So one of the approaches that I use is hypnosis and neuro linguistic programming,
Mhm.
and literally, what NLP does is it helps you recalibrate what you filter for. So let's say two little girls are told that they are ugly when they are little,
Yeah.
and one experiences that with a lot of emotional intensity and negative charge. One doesn't. The one that's experienced it with all the negativity will filter, she'll collect evidence for that experience, whether it's true or not. And so that's how we get self-fulfilling prophecies. That's how we get downward spirals, is we filter in a particular way. And so my work helps you filter differently.
And that is it's reminding me also of so I'm thinking as you speak and just having this experience of going through different books, right? I'm reminded of Algeria's case where the French were using the radio, right, propaganda machine to suppress them and to just kill them energetically, their spirit. And they
Mm-hmm.
at one point switched and flipped the tables on them and decided we're no longer going to let this affect us, and we're actually going to use it against them.
Yes.
So yeah, but as we're talking about that, and as I was listening to a couple of videos that you have online, I was asking myself, but how do we, if we do that, do we risk um letting the true oppression get away with it, right? There's that. Do we risk being in a place of happiness that the system is going to find a place to function without being checked? So for example, the true oppression, like the system has really been designed to suppress
Yes.
and
Absolutely.
subjugate Africans, right?
Absolutely.
Whether you're in the
Absolutely.
United States, in the Caribbean, in Africa, how do you confront that without allowing it to control you mentally and emotionally and spiritually?
Well, see, the thing is we think that I work in polarity, right? So we walk around in different states of emotional charge. I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm gong, I'm pretty, I'm not, right? And we bounce around in polarity. The most powerful place to operate from is neutrality and peace. Because when you aren't looking through the filter of either I'm oppressed or not oppressed, or the polarity, we can see life for what it is. Normally, we see life through who we think we are. But the more clarity you have, the more neutrality you have, the more you can see life for what it is and respond accordingly. There's great agility that comes with peace, including being able to take on power. I've taken on the US government on behalf of my father. That is not a small thing to do. Truly, it's not a small thing to do.
I agree with you. I agree with you. But it's also getting me to the point, because I was, as we have this conversation, I mean, normally and very expectedly, I'm using my own life experience, right,
Hmm.
to look at this situation. When I first started, so again, born and raised on the continent, moved here, have been here for 23 years. But part of that time, I was going along with America is the savior of the world, right? The
Hmm.
United Nations is actually helping us. Look at them, they're helping us. They have helped us progress. Look at all these cities we're building, the cars. I was that African who was seeing the good in the West until
Hmm.
I came to the United States. First of all, the first hand encounter with them, being in spaces with them and seeing how they think, how they move, how they treat us while I'm in relation with them, but also reading about the history of Africans in the United States. I
Right.
got very, very angry at one
Yes.
point.
Yes.
Very angry. It was hard to get over that anger. And I still don't think I have managed to get to a point where I can control it. How do you get yourself from, because I do agree with you. I think in that space of neutrality and peace is where we're able to take action and
Hmm.
actually gain the power to fight the system. But how do you get from the anger, which is normally going to happen when you find out the truth, to the place of neutrality and peace?
Well, see, I think anger can be useful. I just think it has to be constructively directed at your goal, at your target, at your outcome, right? It's not that
Mhm.
anger and that the emotions aren't bad, but often anger or grief or that can be or the residue of trauma can be very debilitating. See, we think that holding on to those feelings gives us fuel, but I would say directing. One of the things about getting neutral is that it gives you the capacity to see life more clearly, and then you can direct you become much more when you are clear and peaceful. You become much more, you're able to take all of that and become very strategic with it.
Yeah, I'm taking notes because I think I'm in your class right now where I'm going to learn to finally be able to get rid of the anger, and because I need to, because there's a lot of work to be done and we need to be very strategic and focused on the work. So,
Well, do you want to do a quick exercise and I can
hey,
show you how to
let's
release
go.
the anger?
Let's go.
Okay. So go ahead and think about what you're angry about.
Do you want me to say it out
Right?
loud or just think about it?
No, just
Okay.
feel it. And notice on a scale of 0 to 10 how intense it is. So 10 is very charged, very alive, very lit, and 0 not at all. So on a scale of 0 to 10, where is it right now?
Beyond 10.
Beyond 10. Okay.
Yeah.
So take that anger, just notice, and I want you to define the elements of it. Notice how big it is inside of you, how big it is inside of you, and notice how what color it is,
Mm,
and notice the size, the shape. Notice how heavy it is. Notice how old it is. Like ask
mm,
it, how old are you? And take all those elements. And now imagine putting all those elements in a box about 2 feet in front of you. You see all those elements there in the box. Okay, you got that?
yes.
Okay, good. Take that box and flip it behind you. So it's like 2 feet behind you. Good. Now flip that box 2 feet to your left and flip that box 2 feet to your right. Now put it above you 2 feet and below you 2 feet. Now swing it around like a hula hoop. Remember a hula hoop when you were a little girl? All
Mm,
around on the horizontal axis. Just swing it around, swing it around. Hula hoop it around your body. Just notice that box traveling around your body. Now above and below you on the vertical axis. Put it above you and below you on the vertical axis. Good. Now hula hoop it around you again on the horizontal plane and above you and below you. Good. Now come back. And so 0 to 10, how charged is the anger?
yeah, I see what you did there.
But how charged is it?
I see what you did. What I'm feeling, what I'm
Mm-hmm.
feeling is, or at least what I felt is I took it and I was able to control it. I felt as if I took it, it's not as heavy. It's not as heavy as it was
Okay.
when you first asked me to go and look at my anger. It's not as heavy.
And so the
Um,
less heavy it becomes, the more space and the more you are available for the solution. See, that heaviness can often stop us from moving. We sit with it and it festers, right?
yeah,
But as solutions, as we do more of that kind of process, more solutions authentically become available to us because we have space, because we are available to
yeah,
solutions.
yeah. So a great example I can give, and I try to all the conversations I have here and on Kumbukeni, I try to make it relatable to the people and our day-to-day lives, right? I
Hmm.
try to put myself in everyone's shoes, or at least I use my own story for others to relate to. The
Right.
moment this anger shows up, number one is when we read an article, when we watch a
Hmm.
video. That's happening a lot now,
Hmm.
with Gaza, with Congo. Um, when we hear announcements, headlines, right? Breaking news.
Hmm.
When we vote and then a certain win is announced. When you're in white spaces and you have to go into meetings, you have to
Hmm.
hear the same BS
Sure.
all the time. My door is
Sure.
open, yet they're not really opening. So those are the moments it occurs. What you just did for me right now, if I did that every time I went into those spaces or I encountered that, it would help me very much center myself. So I'm asking, would that be a good strategy to use where we do what you
Absolutely.
just said, the spinning?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, so that you have more space to operate from, right? Because we can, in a world on fire, we can certainly be in outrage fatigue because there is so much to be outraged about, right? And so that's fine. But we want to be agile. We want to be weaponized as in our being so that we can be very um, purposeful and strategic and clear, right? When we move through, especially the big issues.
Because that fatigue,
I've taken on big issues.
it makes you hopeless.
It can, or it can make you paralyzed, or it can make you glitch, because it all brings friction, right? It brings friction into your lived experience, and so you become triggered. I always say, we use the word in America triggered a lot. Like, she's triggered, he's triggered. What is a trigger? A trigger is when you take a present moment, hello, and you collapse it with something that has happened in the past. So you're here in this present moment, but you're collapsing it with something that happened, that you experienced with emotional intensity back in the past. And then
Yeah.
they become the same thing. So then you trigger and you react and you respond, and you might over respond. But instead of over responding, right, when we collapse the trigger, then we can move with great clarity.
Mm. Okay, so a trigger happens when we relate something that's happening to something that happened in the past. And you're saying the way to confront that is to collapse it.
With the process that I just
Right?
gave you. Hmm.
Yes. Oh, listen. Yes. So in me taking the anger that I'm feeling, envisioning it, acknowledging the power that it has as I'm feeling it, and then taking it and putting it in a box in front of me, and then taking that box and putting it behind me, taking
Hmm.
that box, putting it to my left, taking that
Hmm.
box, putting it to my right, and then starting to spin it horizontally, and then taking it
Hmm.
and spinning it vertically, um,
Hmm.
and doing that for a couple of minutes and then stopping is going to give
Hmm.
me a hold on how I feel about that anger and how much it controls me.
What you'll do is you'll release the charge, right? Because when we
Mhm.
started out, you said it was a 10 plus. There was a lot of charge. There was still the emotion was live, right? And now you
Mhm.
feel more sort of peaceful and there's less
Mhm.
charge. So, yes, trauma has a location, it has a time and a space in both our memory and in our nervous system, right? When we have traumatic events, right, that trigger us, we have this, it has a location. So, all I did in that process was change the location. As we bust through location and right, then we develop a different relationship to the feeling.
Mhm. And usually the location is usually the location for us women, especially, at least for me. And the irony, and I would like you to speak to this, I mean, it's not an irony, the tragedy is because of the location, it gave me health issues, right?
Correct.
We're talking fibroids, like they grew within a year of like intense strength, like like huge difference in size, because I had 1 year of like really, really, really intense strength. So we as women, especially, where it
Hmm.
ends up is in our belly, like right under our heart. That's where all that
Hmm.
pain is held and
Hmm.
all that anger. Um, we are feeling it in our head, but where we store it so that we can function is right there in the center, and it shows up in different health.
A
Um,
woman's positive polarity is her heart, and the man's positive polarity is his genitals. So when we have unprocessed emotion, right, that's not clarified, then they can actually, because our heart is supposed to be a clear vessel, a clear beacon. We are love, right? And it is meant to sort of transmit that way. But when we have unprocessed emotion, then it does store and it does calcify and it does create health problems because it really needs to be clarified.
oh my goodness. Like I can't stop. I'm a student, and also I'm trying to have the show. But you said two things that I'm like going to, and it's taking me somewhere else. And I'm the type
Mhm.
of person who I hear one thing and then rabbit holes, and I'm like, okay, I need to ask you. But what did you call
Oh, I
it again?
got you.
You said a woman's plurality.
Positive
What's the word?
polarity. Her positive polarity
Polarity.
is her
Positive
heart.
polarity is the
Hmm.
heart, and the
Hmm.
man's is the genital. And
Yes.
so if I am going through stress and holding it in and not dealing with it like you instructed us to, that positive polarity can be infected by that anger, right?
Yeah, because when you think about how you experience the anger when we just did the exercise, right?
Yeah.
You're holding it. It's got a grip on your reality. It's stored, right? And then by discharging it a little bit, then it
Mhm.
begins to break up a little bit, all that calcification. So that's a very important process for women to get free, is to, people say like women are so emotional, so emotional. Women are meant to be emotional. We are meant to feel.
Thank you for
right? The
saying that. Yeah.
problem is that when our feelings go unclarified, then we become reactive with that. When they become very deeply clarified, we are meant to feel, we are meant to love, we are meant to be outraged, we're meant to gather the children, we're meant to that is our divine purpose. And so, but often it gets clouded when the emotions are unprocessed and unclarified.
I'm still on mute. The thing I was going to, because one of the way trauma is showing up in our community, the African community, and by African I mean Black. By African I mean I go beyond borders, Africa, wherever you are. Um, is and it's interesting you mentioned the genitals for the men and the heart for the women. So we women um, end up being very, because of the pain and anger we are feeling, it comes out in a very sharp way with whoever we're dealing with, right? In the family, with our friends. Like that's how it comes out sometimes. With a man, it comes out in very sexually abusive ways, right? Where as they're in intercourse, it's an
Mhm.
aggressive instead of a gentle exercise. Is that coming from that?
Oh boy. Okay. So you ready? You ready? You ready?
I
Okay.
told you, like
So,
we
so the purpose of lovemaking, conscious lovemaking, because of this polarity that I just described, is because her positive polarity is her heart and his is his genitals. He needs to be clarified as well. When she's magnetic and he's electric, and so when they come together in union, they form a circuit, right? They form a circuit, and that circuit is meant to heal them both. She is meant to fall back into her heart and into all of her feeling that catalyzes him, that charges him. He and witness with her while she is in all of the tsunami, the ocean of feeling, right? That is what actually arouses him. And he is meant to also um, clarify his, all of that aggression that you're speaking of. It becomes aggression because it is unclarified. So if people were in conscious relating and forming that circuit and are learning allowing the toxicity to burn off, then lovemaking could be a very powerful, very deeply powerful vehicle for not only the clarification of both people, but also it's a tool for reality creation. It's a tool for um, it's a tool for healing of both of them. But people often misuse it because they don't understand the energetic and electric phenomena that it is.
Mm. Thank you so much brother Oladele. Let me just stop with my rabbit holes because there are so many. Welcome. I don't know if you want to join us in conversation. I don't know if you can.
Yeah, I could join your conversation. I can see you guys are flowing, so I don't want to interrupt it. So just carry on. I'll come in. I'm
All right.
listening. Just yes, just carry on. I don't want
All
to
right.
interrupt
Okay.
you.
Um. Yeah. So thank you for saying that. And I don't want to. So we did hear. I'm gonna mute you, brother. Okay. There you go. We did hear how to clarify. And for those of you who did not witness the exercise, Veronica just went through with me. That is how you identify your anger. You know what? Just quickly describe it. The process. Let me not speak for you. The process of clarifying the trauma.
Yeah, all you do is you take negative emotions and you give it dimension, right? You give it a size, a shape, a weight, an age. You give it dimension, right? What it does is it brings your awareness to how you represent it to yourself. Find the anger, right? And then you just take it and you just put it in a box, and then you move it in six directions: before you, behind you, left, right, above, and below, and then swirl it around you on both axes. And it tends to break up. It tends to break up and dismantle those sort of stuck energies, and then you just feel lighter.
So Lord have mercy. Okay. The little girl, the little boy, right? So let's I'm gonna approach this in different stages of our development. So we'll talk about the little ones, we'll talk about the youth. We just spoke about the adults, right? The woman and
Mm-hmm.
the man and how they interact with each other.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the little child that is hearing the teacher in the classroom talk derogatory about her, right? That is seeing the unfairness in the classroom. Now we're talking about reality. We're being specific to the United States environment. That is being told her hair is not pretty. I had a friend recently tell me she's in Europe somewhere and she teaches white children. She's African. And
Right.
she was describing a little black girl with curly hair and this and that. And she said she was beautiful. And she was beautiful as she's telling the story. And one of the little white girls said, no, she wasn't. And the teacher went through the process. Why do you think she's not? Right? She said, no, she's not beautiful. What is your idea of beauty? Blonde hair, blue eyes. The child continues to
Right.
describe that African child was not beautiful because they did not meet those standards that she has, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as I said to my friend, like, how did you feel as a black person hearing this, that you were not beautiful? She said the
Mm-hmm.
child went ahead to console her and say, but you're good, you're strong. So don't feel bad that you're not beautiful because you're strong. So a child that is going through that, because even from my children's stories, sometimes you hear what is going on in the schools. How do they fight not being consumed? Because you talked about the child who is going to associate the incident with how they're feeling, right? And when they are, how do they stop themselves from being consumed by that? How can they use this clarification model you
Yeah.
just
I sent my children to school with my kids to school with the very elite 1%. So Gettys and
Mhm.
Schwab's. I got them $1.2 million in private school education for about $20,000 as a single mother.
Mm.
And because
You need to
I
tell me
wanted,
how to do that. That we can have that conversation on the
yeah,
side.
so that's another conversation. And I didn't know how I was going to do it when I decided to do it. I just did it. And I
Mhm.
did it because I didn't want white people that ran the world to be a mystery to my children.
Exactly.
Right? They still maintained a very black consciousness because I am who I am, but I didn't want people to be a mystery. So they had so if you think about it, that's a pretty extraordinary amount of pressure, and there's extraordinary wealth. And so part of the way that I kept them very grounded was to, your main job in that environment is to really keep their self-esteem quite buoyant, to have them, again, it's about assigning meaning. Like it's asking them what you find valuable about yourself. It's setting up frameworks for them to find value in their very being, their very identity.
Mhm.
And so I did that. I mean, it is possible to do that, but you have to be very mindful about how you speak and communicate. You can do. I'm a master hypnotist, so you can speak negative commands to children and not even know it. Like if you say you never clean your room
Oh,
or you never do your homework, what you're saying is never do your homework. So we have to be very mindful of our own communication and whether it's affirming and it creates a resourceful state in the child or not. So you have to love them into their greatness so that their esteem is so awake and available that they can confront anything.
mm.
And that's just true that is our job as parents, is to have them feel so in love with themselves that anything that comes up that's in conflict with that seems foreign to them, like it's confusing to them, so that they don't internalize it. But that's job one, as I think, as parents. They could because the negativity can only hook in if there's something to hook into, right? So we should be I had to be very mindful because of the choice that I made to put them in this caliber of schools that they felt in love with themselves.
Sorry, like I said, you have other things going on in life, so my children are leaving. I just quick goodbye, quick goodbye.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. So hold on real quick. All right, forget that. I am a parent who has violated. I will call it violated for lack of a better word. I do constantly. You never clean dishes. You never clean your room. I do
That is
all
that is a
the-
hypnotic embedded
yeah,
command.
I do.
That is a hypnotic embedded command. Right? That's what I mean about the subtle. There's nuance to like how we communicate and designing communicate with our children that are just organically affirming to them, right? But you
Mhm.
see how subtle that is and how simple, but you don't even know that that's what you're doing.
Yeah. And the sad thing is, and now I'm thinking about it, is the room never gets cleaned, but I don't even realize that I'm the reason why the room never gets cleaned because I did that. Veronica, please help us fix ourselves. We're in a mess and we don't even know it.
Right.
We are busy thinking, I need to be that disciplinary parent. I need to, like, and sometimes it's you also not clarifying the anger that you're feeling in that moment and just, shh, right? Like when
This
I
is
find
why
the dishes in the sink, instead of me clarifying that anger, I just, shh.
right. That's why we remove the triggers so that we are clear in our and availability in our communication so that we can see things clearly without the anger goggles or shows. That's why, because right, when we can see clearly what's happening. Right.
Yeah.
And then in terms of like the embedded commands, when I realized I was doing that, I really reprogrammed, I hypnotized myself to only speak positive embedded commands. And you'd be
Mm,
amazed. It's communication frameworks that you use with children that have them grow into themselves or resist, right? I never got, my kids didn't really go through teenage rebellion
yeah.
because they had a very specific
Good for
lane that
you.
I designed
Yeah.
that they could bounce around in and have a lot of choice and autonomy, right? They could have all that, but they didn't have to rebel against, they didn't have anything to rebel because
So
it's a framework of communication.
yeah, we as parents complain about our teenagers rebelling, but we actually have created that situation, is what
Correct.
you're telling us.
Correct.
So as you talk about this, I'm thinking about the value in having the resources. Do you have any books you've written on this that you would like our community to know about?
Well, I wrote
Or articles?
the black paper I wrote 15 years ago. It was sort of my love letter to the Black community.
Mhm.
Uh, and that I'm going to be up this year and doing Black Paper 2.0, but it sort of
Mhm.
describes the framework for how conditioning works in the Black community, what our conditioning has been. I also
Yeah.
created a hypnosis program, the world's first culturally competent hypnosis program that looks at the
Mhm.
most negative identities that we have about what it means to be Black.
Mhm.
Jan Van Zandt was on that, and yeah, and it was my love letter to the Black community. Like, how do we use the tool of hypnosis in that case
Mhm.
to really reprogram our identity?
Yeah. So you called it the black letter,
The Black paper.
the black paper, and where can they find it? Where can we find the black paper?
I think it is on the site in LinkedIn.
Okay. So if we follow you on LinkedIn, we can get the site
I
and we
think
can find the book.
Oladele posted it in LinkedIn.
All right. Okay. Okay. So because I did read something from you, that is what you're referring to.
Yes.
All right. Okay. So yes, we will share that one more time because it is essential that we have that. Yes. Yes. It's essential that we, again, you say, for me as a parent who's trying to survive, right, and who's
Mm-hmm.
trying to get through the day, and who, for myself, I haven't even figured myself completely. I too am discovering myself with each day, right? Sometimes we get so much on autopilot that, again, you're saying, we don't recognize what we are doing. So, and also there's the parent who has no clue about these things, has no clue that they're going through trauma, has no clue where it's coming from, has no clue that they need to get rid of that because it's going to affect them negatively in one way or another. So that the knowledge, the information being accessible to our people is very, very important. And I think that's another thing that we need to do to provide that. So I would love to see more books from you. This is me telling you, This is me doing a very African thing and voluntarily. Please write some more books. Please write a book with all this information.
I'm gonna be doing a lot more this year.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna be really kind of broadcasting a lot more information
Okay.
about all of this,
Yeah.
and updating the black paper. And I'm gonna also do the state thing this year, the state of the black woman, because
Mm-hmm.
I really want to, and since I was even doing hypnosis 15 years ago, the approaches that I've learned since then are even more potent, more powerful. I mean, I have clients that were being recommended to electroshock therapy. They were in suicidal ideation. They were in inpatient treatment, and literally within two sessions, it had all blown out. I have a client who, when she was 5 years old, her grandfather murdered her sister in front of her, slit her throat, then killed himself. And that haunted her every day for 50 years. Every day she would grieve and be distraught, and because it's a triple, trauma. And in about 2 sessions, we cleared that completely out. We just unplugged it. We just completely unplugged it for her.
Yeah.
So the work that I've even done since I learned hypnosis has been quite miraculous in terms of, and I don't just clear trauma for trauma's sake. It's power. You feel better. Yes, you feel better emotionally. You face life with much more sense of possibility.
Mm-hmm.
But what we don't realize is that that trauma is like all this stuck energy in our nervous system. And when we clarify it, then that becomes available fuel to direct at the targets of your choosing.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason that my people leap, they just quantum leap, is because we are so traumatized. But when we deconstruct it and turn it into fuel, that fuel becomes an availability to meet our targets.
Yeah. I guess a follow-up on the black paper is what got you to say, because as you're speaking, and also from experience on finally being aware of what is happening around me, right? That my situational awareness, my African consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
I see the need. What got you to sit down and say, I need to write something to help people? Like, what was it? And I don't want to use the word triggered. What was it that inspired you writing black paper?
Well, I just had to sort of synthesize and take everything out of my, experience as the daughter of a Black Panther. I
Mm-hmm.
founded the world's first Black coaching organization.
Mm-hmm.
And so back before everybody and their mama was a coach, we were taking culturally competent coaching into the Black community by partnering with Black professional associations nationally in America. And so we were on the ground, and I didn't know what I was doing. We were just making it up as we went. It was at that point that I said, I have to take all the things that I've learned and synthesize and put it into something that people can access, and put to paper what I've also experienced and the results that I've seen. This work is a real answer for the Black community. I mean, truly, this work is a true answer, because people, when you
I agree.
de-traumatize them, they become like rocket ships. They become like we become restored to sort of our original selves. I
Yeah.
think it is so important to have to restore the original people to their original self, to their factory settings. And our factory settings are before the great interruption that we have experienced on this planet. So this deconstructs that interruption.
And this goes now into so much more. The reason why we continue falling for the so every time I'm talking to our community members about revolution and the need to fight the system, right? They say me, especially on the continent, what is Africa supposed to do? How are we going to survive without the West? So I think not I'm going back to the word, let's make sure we're using, not clarifying
Mm-hmm.
the trauma that we are experiencing
Right.
has gotten us to a point where again we've been paralyzed, and now we're just we think it's, or we're comfortable with going along instead of fighting the system.
Mhm.
And this is happening everywhere, not just on the continent, but also in the Black community here. So when we're trying to do community building work and we're trying to get people to join the organization so that we can start doing revolutionary work, right? When we talk to them about what needs to be done, a lot of people don't think you can fight the United States. They're scared to do it. And I think it comes from this not clarifying their trauma and going back to their original self. So I don't know if it's a too big of a task for me to ask you, but think about it that way, right? We have the continent, we have elsewhere in the Caribbean, in the United States. We need to be liberated.
Yes.
In order to be liberated, we need to all function in an optimum way so that we can take the action that is required. There's
Hmm.
trauma hindering us from doing that.
Yes.
What do we do as a collective?
Absolutely. Well, think about it even from the standpoint of, so I'm the daughter of a Black Panther, right? So
Mm-hmm.
in the U.S. they attempted to crush. Like my life story is very similar to like Judas and the Black Messiah in terms of right, and so there was a hunt to crush the Black Messiah, the charismatic leader that would free his people.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about that the war that they waged to do that, it impacts us all, no matter where throughout the diaspora. That war that they wage has a chilling effect on anyone that would attempt to achieve their liberation, right? And that was done very purposely and very publicly and very vividly, so that so that no one would attempt it. And so that is a collective trauma, right? Because all
Yeah.
of the great leaders were put down, so to speak. So there's a lot so we can't underestimate the downward pressure that creates on the psyche and our ability to be very agile and be very strategic.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It does. And
Mm-hmm.
so again, you have to kind of go, it's like defragging a hard drive. You've got to kind of go in line by line and decode it so that the person is free. Because we choose differently when we are not don't feel subject to the pressure, or if we're not in apathy because we've given up and we are in resignation. We move differently. I could not have taken
I've
on
been moving
I could not have taken on
Mm-hmm.
the U.S. Attorney General and the Fraternal Order of Police and the U.S. government on behalf of my father if I didn't have some deep inner sense of certainty that transcended my circumstances.
Yeah. And it's funny you say that, because what they do, those who haven't achieved what you have and what I am in the process of, is they call us crazy. Like, you must
Mm-hmm.
be crazy if you think you're going to take on the US government, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
the response you get from people. You must
Mm-hmm.
be crazy if you think you're going to take on such and such. You Africans must be crazy if you think you're going to liberate yourselves and function by yourselves, right? Despite
Right.
the fact that we are literally sitting on the resources that feed the whole world.
Correct.
Okay, this is interesting you're saying this. So we need to flip the script on everyone,
Mm-hmm.
and we need to pronounce and proclaim this message that to be in the state you are in, where, because you've gone back to your original self, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've gone back to your original self. You are able to see your capability beyond the limitations
Mm-hmm.
of current society,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? And that's brilliant, and that is exactly what I'm talking about. How are you going to get our fellow brothers and sisters there? Because sometimes the things that I've done, and a lot of them I cannot speak on them publicly. A lot of people did not believe that I could do them, right? But I did them because I was like, first of all, I was certain that what I was confronting was
Right.
wrong, and I
Right.
wasn't. The one thing, and it might sound arrogant, the one way I started dealing with this was in the employment I was in. I started saying, I'm not going to be stopped from confronting you just because you have a title, right?
Mm-hmm.
No, America is very, but just capitalism in general is
Mm-hmm.
very on chain of command. You
Mm-hmm.
cannot go to a senior person to talk to them about an issue before you have gone through so many other levels, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you talk to this senior person in a certain way, you're out of line. So for me, I refused to be held by those boundaries. And now we're talking, for those of you, as far as making this relatable to our day-to-day lives, we're talking now about being in white spaces, right? where you're restricted from presenting yourself, from addressing issues because you're told, first of all, you have to address this person that is treating you badly as sir. You have to address them as senior this and that and that and that. How, so myself, the way I did that was I stopped seeing them for their titles. I started seeing them for their actions. And their actions started controlling the way I treated them and the way I respected them or not, how I valued who they were. So how do we, as a general society, today on Kumbukeni, we just covered the current lawsuit that South Africa has brought against Israel. If you had to talk to a regular person who doesn't know the history or who's still beholden on the imperialist powers, they would say to you, it's crazy that South Africa thinks they can go against Israel. Who do they think they are? You know, that's the common trend. South Africa is just a country in Africa, but South Africa has said, we are a country. We have every right to stand up and say that this is wrong. How do you get yourself from the position of the many other African countries and many other Black spaces that think they cannot confront imperialism to this? And that is what you just described before. As you can see, I'm going around because I'm letting my brain go around. If you want to speak on that, quickly speak on that. If I confused you, let me know I confused you, and we can.
No, but say the question again.
So
what's just the simplest question?
And I think you answered it before. Where we, as a collective, as Africans, we can move away, and I think it goes back to Black consciousness and African consciousness, going back to your original self. And now it's the work. Let me limit it to the work environment. How you, as a person working in white spaces, can be able to defend yourself, right? And look out for yourself so that you do not fall victim to the subjugating system.
This is going to sound very, very, very counterintuitive, and it's going to sound like that can't be true, but it is true.
Yes.
Because I coach so many people, a lot of leaders in white spaces. Before I became a coach 23 years ago, I was a manager and navigating white spaces at UCSF. I did a lot. I had a lot of stuff, going on. I would leap titles because I was getting coached at the time. I became very clarified. I became very clarified about my intent, and I'd put pressure on people 2 and 3 layers above me, like senior vice presidents of UCSF Stanford, and I would have them do my bidding. And it was because inside I wasn't emotionally attached to what they did, but my intent is what set the path. But it was such a clarified intent. And people would say, I don't understand how you're doing what you're doing and how you're getting what you want. Like, nobody's doing what you're doing. And I was just like, I know, but I'm clear. And so I know it sounds maybe like a fantasy, like, oh, just be clear. But I don't mean like clear. I mean clear in your core, in your vibration. You'd be amazed how many people I'm coaching leaders right now to sort of leap and leap and leap inside very white male spaces. And it's because I clarify them and then I help them direct their intent. And I swear, it appears to the naked eye as miraculous because it's moving energy and intent in ways. See, we think that the system and the people that run it are very clear and of very clear intent. A lot of times they've just failed upwards, and their incompetence sort of precedes them. You can become a weapon in those terrains with your intent. It's being clear.
And I happen to actually agree with you and can relate, because that's what it took for me to be able to come out of that place of being crushed by it and coming above it.
Right. So what changed? What did you decide to focus on that allowed that to change?
I'm thinking, you asked that and I went straight to my head. I just said, F it. Right. F it. F following this system that is telling me to behave in this way. No, I can spread my wings. And I know what I'm doing is right. I know what I'm fighting for is right. And nothing else that is being said to me is going to take me away from this, because I know it's right. And I know the way I'm pursuing it is also right.
And so what changed when you made that decision?
Oh, I was unstoppable. I wasn't fearful. Like,
Right.
I didn't let fear control me. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So that's what I mean about being peaceful and neutral and uncharged and clarified, because all of that muddies our intent. When you got clear, it didn't matter. It's an example of what I'm talking about.
Thank
My work just gets you there faster. It's a way it intervenes in that whole process and gets you there faster. But yeah,
yeah.
you know.
It took me 5 years to get there, 5 years of pain, and then 3 years of going through it. Yeah.
Right. So I could
You're
do
right.
that in I could do that in a week. I could have you be
I,
clear in a week.
I had the long process. There was nothing expedited about how I got there,
Right.
and it was very painful. So
Right.
let's move on to the youth. Another thing, and there are a couple of other questions, but there's one that's on the screen right now. So let's go there before we go to the youth. How did your, and I feel like you've spoken to this, but let's see whether they approach it differently. How did your upbringing as a daughter of a Black Panther influence your mindset from a spiritual perspective?
Well, it's interesting because I ended up when I went to college at UC Berkeley,
Mhm.
and I was really coming into recrafting my identity, because
Mhm.
I knew I had been a little bit of therapy. I knew I'd been traumatized. I was in pain. I started doing work around enlightenment intensives, where like Buddha, like enlightenment, right? And I began to have enlightenment experiences, and so that began to clarify my inner being. And now I can bring people. I'm going to do a meditation workshop soon. So I can bring people to enlightenment in about an hour. And so when
Oh.
you become enlightenment is a state of non-duality,
Mhm.
where there's no separation, and you become very powerful in that place of neutrality and peace. So my spiritual work, and I do spiritual work with people, but it's not ideological. It's really the architecture of spirit. I look at the architecture of the soul of the being, and where the distortion is, where it's just the architecture of it. And then I collapse the disempowered architectures, and then what emerges is the self, the original settings, right? So yeah, I do. My take on spirituality is very neutral. It's about the architecture of it, the science of it, and it works. Like I do with my clients all the time.
You're using Western terms to describe what you're talking about, but it's very African. It's very African.
Mm-hmm.
What in Kiswahili culture, we call that amhenga, right? We call the medicine man, but not
Mm-hmm.
accurate translation of that.
Mm-hmm.
But you're literally describing African spirituality.
Yes. Even like hypnosis, neuro linguistic programming, the guys Bandler and Grindler, they got that from watching Street Hustlers and Witch
Yes.
Doctors. So it's all had its origin there. And yes, I do see my work as a part of my father's legacy evolution. So yeah, it is the legacy of my father.
Talk about a little bit about him before we go to the teenagers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, you talked about the fact that he's been behind prison bars but has found peace. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and I think I've seen that too with Mumia as he continues to write and has he continues to talk. I saw that too when I read about Angela Davis and how she was moving. It seemed like that's how she, for most of them, if not all of them, the way they were able to manage is to get to that place. So how did
Mm-hmm.
he achieve that? And how does he maintain it despite all the
Meditation. He does shakuhachi flute. He keeps very connected to the outside world. Like he knows everybody, like the heir to the Coca-Cola fortune, the Prince of Tonga. Like he's always introducing me to people. But I'm on the outside, and he's
the
like, "Oh, meet my
irony in
friend."
that? You have no idea. Like, this is a man who's behind prison. Like, first of all,
Right.
let me just go off and say this system, to think that they can hold back who we are with walls made
Mm-hmm.
of stone.
Mm-hmm.
They have no
Mm-hmm.
concept of the power of
Spirit.
spirituality. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
because your
Mm-hmm.
father has not been held back in being a father to you by those walls. From what you're
Mm-hmm.
saying, he's not been held back from learning about the environment and the what's going on in the world and the people that he connects you with by those walls.
Mm-hmm.
He is still
Right.
functioning.
Right. Yes.
What
Yeah.
so when he fast, does he have this clarity and this peace when he goes in, or does he go in, he's angry, he's pushing back, he's emotional, and he finds it at one point? Like, does that happen, or did he go in with clarity?
Yeah, it's his. He has in his spiritual practice. I think that that has informed. It. It's like water, going over a stone. It's like it soft.
Mm.
It sculpts and it erodes. It smooths and it's right. So his
Mhm.
spirit is very. There's not a bitterness and anger and rage. He's very clear. See, that's what I mean. It's all clarity. And so the thing is, as Black people all over the world, we have to come to deep clarity as individuals,
Mhm.
or we can join hands and gather clarity as a collective.
Mm. So we have to
It's
heal
like
ourselves before we.
we have to heal ourselves before we can join hands with other healed people and then take that collective intent, healed and clarified intent, non-reactive intent, and move in the world.
And so now I'm immediately, because I'm a person who wants to see the I want to see it being reverberated, right? I want to see what happened to your father happen to many more people, that control. And so as you
Mhm.
talk about him, I'm already seeing myself sitting at his feet and saying, I want to sit at his feet and learn more. So I hope he gets out and he gets to do that, to sit with us and teach us and share the wisdom with us. Um, oh God, yes. It's intense. I'm sorry. I'm feeling an intense energy. So
Yeah,
going to the
yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
No, it is intense. It's all very intense. I think one of the reasons I was given a very intense lifetime is so that I have the capacity to stand witness with others that are in great intensity, which is the Black experience worldwide, but
Mhm,
also to help people realize how to take that intensity and transmute it into power.
mhm,
And we have to do that on the individual basis first. We have to heal ourselves so that we can heal our children, so
mhm.
that we can join hands and arms, link arms, and heal this world. And I
Yes.
think that we can, but I think until we get this piece, we will constantly walk around being a living, breathing reaction to our circumstances.
And
We
then
will walk around being reaction to our circumstances.
and therefore in my head I'm thinking, because we just started an organization called Jumuiya ya Nguzo Saba, and education is going to be one of the services that we offer the community. In my head, I'm already thinking, okay, I need to speak to Veronica, and we need to set up a class that she's going to teach on this. We need to figure out the terms, and we need a class on spirituality and getting ourselves together, where we can heal ourselves so that we can join hands with other healed people. So I'm putting a pin on that and letting you know that I'll be reaching out to you for that. We need that class, and we need to teach others to teach that class so that we can have it like in
Mm-hmm.
more African spaces.
Mm-hmm.
The youth. And I had mentioned this to you before as we were talking before we came on live, that I read Dr. DeJoy's Post Traumatic Slave
Mm-hmm.
Syndrome,
Mm-hmm.
and she talks about the young men, right? Someone in the questions, and we'll go to the audience's questions in a bit, was talking about black men, but let's talk about the black male youth first, but just
Mm-hmm.
in general the youth, because it's happening to the girls too. My daughter has shared videos of fights, and we are in a good neighborhood,
Mm-hmm.
we're in a good school district, but fights in class, fights
Mm-hmm.
like where they pull each other's clothes off. And I witnessed a video that went viral of a child in a town not too far from us, not a good school district, but still this should not happen in a school, where they were in school in the hallways, beaten, like mass beating of us one child who ended up in fetal position to protect his body from all the hitting. And this is happening everywhere now in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Fights with our youth, and mostly it's Black youth.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've had stories of someone whose shoe was stepped on and they shot someone to death, whose
Mm-hmm.
jacket was taken and they shot someone to death. How do we get our youth from this reactionary place to a
Well,
place?
I think we underestimate the fact that COVID and lockdown was a
Mhm.
mass traumatizing event worldwide. Like we really dealt with the wake of
Yeah.
that and what it's caused. And that how when we went inside and became glued to our screens, and then there was all of this programming and indoctrination on screens. And then I don't think that anybody has actually devised a way for people to intentionally sort of like unpack all that.
Yeah.
And so I think that what you find is even online, and more kids are online, is that there's more meanness, and there's less respect for
Yes.
your neighbor, and there's more self. Right, we're in a very defensive posture, and I think that we have not recovered from this mass traumatic event called COVID. All the death, all the unprocessed grief, all of the, and so we haven't reckoned with that, and so I think as parents, like if I was raising kids in this day and age, it would be 80% mindset work with them and 20% having them go into the world and execute. I think you have to
Mhm.
equip them with the self love and mental clarity to confront the world that we live in.
So can we put together a class like that? Like, I'm willing to work with you, to work with many other people. We need to put together a class like that.
Okay.
We need to, yeah, because we talk about, I at one point in my journey of finding clarity and saying to hell with all these titles, I said to myself, I can no longer complain about the system if I'm not doing something to change it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we
Mm-hmm.
cannot talk about we're not addressing COVID without saying, okay, now let's sit down and address it, right?
Right.
How are we going to address it? How are we going to confront it? How will we bring healing? So just putting it out there for you. And we recently had Dr. Anderson in the UK who's doing some work with the youth. So it would be nice to connect with him. It would be nice to introduce you to him. He's a lovely man. That we all need to come together and see how we can put this together
Mm-hmm.
and bring healing to our community.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. If you have, I see your mind is going somewhere. You want to say something?
Well, yeah, and I think here's what I've discovered of having, I always say I've been in the Negro and Negress healing business for 24
Mm.
years. So what I would say in my observation, having healed so many people, is that as melanated people, we uniquely have, because we have been so deeply traumatized, but yet because we carry so much power, I would
Mm-hmm.
say that when we get this last 10 to 15%, we take off like a rocket ship, because when we transform all that trauma into power and fuel
Mm.
that we uniquely embody and carry, then we become a force. But people haven't figured out this last 15%. They just have. I've cracked the code on the last 15%. We leap higher and faster when we get this piece, when we transform our trauma. I swear to God, and I have. If you go to any of my websites, you'll see like testimonials. You can see like people like you reorient people's lives, and because I feel like we're uniquely qualified with our melanin, that all
Mm-hmm.
becomes available fuel to get big things done.
Yeah. Let's figure out how to put together. I mean, the place to start right now would be the youth. So if we can start with a program for the youth, that would be great to figure out how we can do that. I'm gonna go. Yes. Yes. My brother is saying the same thing. We need to figure out how to offer these classes. Yes, we do. So let's go to the audience questions. There's a question. I'm not sure if you can see the question on the screen. I'm going to read it, but just wanted to know if you can see it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. So how do we achieve this clarity when there are puppet handlers and their handlers focused on mindset control and propaganda? So we're working on self. while the
Mhm.
system is still doing the stuff it does.
Mhm.
Um, so how do we do that? It's almost
Yeah.
like, how do we put on that aluminum cape so that the aliens do not affect us? But go ahead.
I mean, we might want to welcome our alien overlords at this point. But anyway, it always comes down to, who do you think you are in the matter? Who do you
Mm.
think you are in the matter? So when I took on the Fraternal Order of Police and the U.S. Parole Commission and the Attorney Alberto Gonzalez on behalf of my father, I had to have more certainty in the conviction of my truth and his case than I did for who they were. And I'm not saying that that's easy, and I'm not saying that it was perfect. He's still in, but we've chipped away. But I mean, they were very powerful, the most powerful legal system on earth considered my father enemy number one
Mm.
and public enemy number one. And so that's no small thing. And so, I think so. Everything is propaganda, From my perspective, if you look at like hip hop, that has been, when it got transformed from its original form of telling the story of what was happening in the streets
Yes.
to talking about bitches and hoes. You take that, put it on a binaural beat, which is hypnotic. The beats are hypnotic, and you
Ooh.
put it on a headset, and you pump that into somebody's subconscious. Then you basically have turned people into walking, angry, violating weapons through hypnosis. It's hypnotic. So, right? If you sit down and turn on a television, it's hypnotic because it takes your brainwave from an alpha waking state down into delta or above delta, which is hypnotic. So when you talk about programming and propaganda, we are awash in propaganda. None of it, and then very little of it means us any good. So the question is, it's not like focused on mindset control. It's all mind control and propaganda. So who must we be in the matter? And do you believe, and I believe this, and I've witnessed this, and I have caused this in people, that that the soul and the being, when clarified,
Mhm.
has the personal power to not only block out that stuff and not be a subject to it, but fight it in ways that are meaningful. I mean, it's everywhere. The propaganda. It's a whole system is built on that.
You're
But you
right.
have to understand that you're being hypnotized into this behavior. And my thing is, you got to if that's the case, then you got to hypnotize yourself out of this behavior.
Yes. Yeah.
But it
Like
is
literally
hypnosis.
wake up in the morning and remind yourself who you are
Mm-hmm.
every single day.
Mm-hmm.
When you're driving your car, remind yourself who you are. But you're right, it's everywhere. It's in the commercials, it's in the pop-up alerts on your phone, it's in fashion, it's in church. For heaven's sake, it's in church,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um yes, let's continue. Someone is asking this. No, I'm gonna need to sit with this later. I'm gonna need to sit with this and center myself later, because this is, and I'm glad. Thank you so much for doing this. But I put another one, a question. Okay. Um oh, are we talking about being locked in COVID? Doesn't being locked in itself create violence, even under suggestive fear based lockdown? I mean, because there are people who did who say that COVID was a whole fear
I
exercise.
think I think it created so much fear. I
Mm.
created a company at the time where, because no one was, people didn't have a way to mourn and do funerals in the States, right? And so I created a virtual memorial service so people could honor. People were not able to send off loved ones and grieve them appropriately in the way that they did historically before lockdown. So I created a program to offer people and to offer funeral homes
Uh-huh.
but just the idea that you can't, that your process for grief is unreconciled, it's unresolved, right? So that unaddressed creates a powder keg in the humans. And then you compound that with all of the grief, you compound that with all of the restraint and constraint that we were experiencing. You compound that with people now glued to screens all the time, right? So now when you get back out in the world after that, all of that stuff, if it's not resolved in the way that I'm talking about, it doesn't go anywhere. It's still there.
Yeah.
And now you're seeing people, and then I think the overwhelm of all the systems and teachers and frontline workers, and right, it's like there's this erosion of civility. There's this erosion, but there's been like a stop block on like resources, and so everybody's doing more with less. It's harder. People are madder. Yeah, I was just talking to somebody in therapy that was a therapist that was saying, is there another word for PTSD? Because it's just like it's relentless. It's trauma after trauma after trauma. But the thing is, if your source traumas aren't resolved, then you're going to constantly be triggering to all the traumas that are out here, right? You're going to have outrage fatigue. You're going to be triggered by everything. So it's relentless. So, but there is a way to. It's like a tree, right? And so if there's a root event or set of events that cause the trauma, then the branches and the other branches are going to repeat that. But if you go in and yank it out at the root, then it changes the branches, and it changes how you trigger. I have clients that I have a Black client who was in the movie Top Gun. And so there she is at the Cannes Film Festival on the red carpet. All the lights are flashing. She's the Black girl on the red carpet. And she gets inside the theater and sits down, and she's not in the movie. And no one told her in advance that she was not going to be in the movie. And it wasn't her fault. They shot it during COVID. In editing, they realized that her part, in editing, you got to figure out, is there continuity? Does it make sense? And so her part got cut. She collapsed inside. She felt terrible, and she's trying to mingle, and she had to fly to Canada set. She was in shambles, and that may seem like, first world problem, but it's a Black girl problem. And she had to perform, and she felt crushed inside. And so, and again, it's like, what meaning do you assign to that? So, I did a session with her, got her all stitched up so that she could be at peace and in equilibrium. So the circumstances are what they are. It is always about who we are in the matter. And who we are in the matter comes from how we deal with this pressure called trauma, how we respond, how we show up, how we live. I find that it all comes back to that.
Yeah. Yeah. This is going to be some powerful process if a good number of us take it on. It will be. How do we make Ubuntu manifest in the Alkebulan community? You're familiar with Ubuntu?
Yes.
Yes.
But so, in what sense?
How I'm guessing the question is, how do we make it more acceptable, more practiced, what we do as a normal thing, more known to us?
Well, I think with everything that we want to impress upon our community, I think we have to create compelling reasons why.
Yeah.
Right? We have to, in other words, we know in our day-to-day experience the amount of pain and the amount of disconnect we may be in, right, from each other. But I think we have to, it's like when I was putting Black coaches on the map, to make it viable and to make it grow, you have to demonstrate to somebody what they're missing if they don't practice that and don't engage in it, and what's available to them if they do. It's a bit of a sales job, right? And that is with all things political, spiritual. You got to sell it a little bit, right? To let people know what's at stake for them if they don't. What happens to them if they won't, right? You can't get people necessarily to move with even great ideas. You have to demonstrate the polarity of what happens when you don't and what happens when you do. And I think we haven't taken the really potent principles in our community enough, and frame them in such a way that people feel compelled to move towards them.
I like that approach. And I don't know if it's me who's translating it erroneously, but that is tough love, right? Where you straight up tell them this is the situation. If you take this action, another African way of being. If you take this action, because African proverbs are all about this. African
Mm-hmm.
proverbs basically told you if you behave in this way, this is the result. If
Mm-hmm.
you don't behave in this way, this is the result. And that is, I'm telling you what the facts are. If you
Well,
take this
it's
action, that's the result.
even better, help them discover it for themselves. If help
Oh.
them come to their own inner conclusion about what happens, what the pain will be and what the pleasure will be, what the pit will be and what the promise will be. You have to put, because people are often running around in very apathetic states, right? And so
Mhm.
to open them up, you have to show them the contrast, the polarity. This is with anything, by the way. I don't care if it means, getting your 3-year-old to eat vegetables.
Mhm.
There's a way this is all communication frames that allow people to step into awareness and understanding, but it is our job to set up the frame correctly about anything that we are presenting or proposing.
How do we get them to get there themselves without experiencing the pain?
It's a set of questions. So it's
Mm.
always a set of questions. What will happen? And I don't know specifically, but it's always a set of questions about to get them to come to self-awareness about the prices that they're paying. What's the current reality? It's like how do you
Let's
frame
take
questions to give people a reality check?
let's take for example, this is a challenge most parents go through, right? You have a child who's becoming a teenager, they're hanging out with the wrong crowd, you don't want them to get into drugs. Let's a situation
Mm-hmm.
like that. How do
Mm-hmm.
you get them to to see it before they get in it?
Well, I mean, it's in that case, it's sort of like what I would call like aversion therapy,
Mm.
like taking people into environments where they get to see perhaps
Mm.
the real consequences, real live. Here's the reality check. Here's the trajectory. If you continue on this trajectory, this is where you may end up. Like, give them something that's real, right? And vivid and compelling so that they get it in their nervous system about the path,
Are
right?
you
You
talking about
have
a
to
field
always
trip
be
to
clear
prison?
about what the path is. There's a path that every action has a path. So this path leads to this,
Yeah.
and this path leads to that, and you've got to get that. You've got to make that more vivid and compelling than their
Mhm.
current reality. See,
Mhm.
we don't often telling people doesn't necessarily put them into the state where it's like the path, like you see that it's more compelling. We've got to
Mhm.
make both the painful path very compelling and very vivid so people will avoid it. We have to
Mhm.
make the compelling path, the pleasure path, the promise path very compelling so that people will move towards it, right? We have to use these polarities of high and low and all of that to make it very real for people, because that's the only way you're going to disrupt the indoctrination and the propaganda and get their attention. Your indoctrination has to be more powerful and more potent than their current reality. And
Mhm.
often we're not in it. We're not like it, we can't compete with it. So we think
Yeah.
we have to be a more vivid stand in our children's lives than what they're perceiving. You got to make it very real and very vivid and very in their nervous system.
I'm trying to figure out how to go beyond that and do it as far as the African liberation movement. I need to sit and figure this out. But this is good advice. Thank you so much for it. How can we, who are building community, who are revolutionaries, help our fellow brothers and sisters, African brothers and sisters, see the pain of not getting African liberation? But the frustration is as if they're not experiencing it now, but let's pretend they don't get it. Like, how do we get them to see if we don't get liberated, like permanently liberated? Um, this is going to be the result. And if we do get liberated, as in if the West is no longer influencing Africa, if we are interacting between the Caribbean, Africa, in the United States diaspora, the African community there, we are engaging with each other, we can do business, we are caring for each other, we are gathering, and we are being in our full African self. I need to figure out how to do that.
Well, think about what white supremacists do. Because I pay attention to white nationalist spaces, and I always have. And I watched the rise. I watched the messaging move from Stormfront message boards to the 4chan boards to and they radicalized young sexually frustrated men, and then that was a gateway drug to white nationalism. And so much of that came from painting a very vivid picture of what it's going to look like when all of the migrants come, and what happens when we don't have white babies anymore. And they paint a very vivid picture of indoctrination about what life looks like when there's no more whiteness. That they beat that drum, and they beat that drum, and they beat that drum. And if you take it and you put it to young men that are sexually frustrated, then you reprogram their minds to begin to think of things in those terms, and then that evolves, right? You plant the seed, and then you water that seed. So that's how they mobilize and indoctrinate white nationalists. That's what they do. They paint a very vivid picture about, you'll never get a wife, and you'll never get any cooch again, and you'll never have white babies, and right, and we have to defend ourselves. It's quite.
Thank you so much. You just gave me the answer, and I agree. It's brilliant. I agree. I mean, I have mentioned it before, but yes, that is the solution.
That's what they're doing.
They will find out when they find out. We're not going to talk about that. We will say less. Thank you so much for that one. Because this one now, it means getting together those who are actually doing the community work and putting this to work. But it also means getting the funding to do it, because that's another thing that helps them. They have the funding to put out.
The revolution must be monetized. The revolution must be monetized.
We have to liberate ourselves financially to continue the work. So usually on the Imagine Alkebulan, we ask the guest that comes before you to give you a question to answer, and then before you leave, we'll ask you what is your question for the follow-up guest, right? That we will ask our next guest. So the guest who was with us previously, and I don't remember, was it Dr. Anderson Oladele? You can just not, Dr. Anderson, that I was saying I need to introduce you to, or we need to introduce you to. Ask this of you: how do you, on a daily basis, ensure that you are operating at a higher frequency? When I saw the question and given our conversation, I was like, oh, this is perfect for her. The same thing happened to him, the question that was given, and you don't know each other, but it's for you. How do you, on a daily basis, ensure that you are operating at a higher frequency?
My whole life is really built around 80% of my spiritual and energetic life, and then 20% execution. I mean, maybe that's not always true, but I really focus on recalibrating my mind and being very agile on a day-to-day basis to have clarity. So clarity is sort of job one for me. And then I find that when you move from clarity, then your results tend to accelerate. They tend to go faster. It requires less effort. The more clear you are, the less effort it requires. Your mind begins to move the mountain, right? More than, right? And expect miracles, right? That comes from a clear mind. So that is sort of how I wake up in life, is in the gathering of sort of energy and fuel and clarity. And I'm in my own lab. I don't do things with my clients before I do them to myself. So I'm in a constant process of deconstructing my own pain. And it's work that's never quite done. And I've been at this for a long time. But whenever we're attempting to do new big things that we've never done before, we may have fears or stuff or previous trauma that stops us and slows us down. So we have to constantly be knocking that out. And so that's sort of, I live my life's work in that sense.
Yeah, I like that, because as you describe that, and we have another question from the audience, but before we get to it, as you describe that, it went, again, I put myself in I go back to my life, right? A lot of times we just get out of bed. We just get up, and now in these current days, a lot of times we just get out of bed and get on our phones. Like we don't
Mm-hmm.
even, we're not intentional about that process.
Mm-hmm.
And for you to get up and intentionally center yourself, and
Mm-hmm.
that's, thank
Mm-hmm.
you. Yes, I can see how that is ensuring you operate at a higher frequency, but just
Mm-hmm.
being intentional in that moment of rising to face the day. um
You have to set the tone for your life, and that has to be on purpose.
Set the tone for your life, everyone, and that has to be on purpose. um Someone is asking, Western thought says intelligence is measured by a test. Dr. Amos Wilson says intelligence is resolving your own issues for self. This is what you just said, or community for others. What are your thoughts? Did you get that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I think that thinking is actually overrated. It's going to sound, to me, thinking is slow. It's mechanical. For me, intuition and the connection and the to right and to let the download come and to be very agile. I'm very much sort of, I call it like the God Squad. I'm constantly sort of like asking and checking in moment to moment to moment, because I often in business I have to make a lot of decisions on the fly, on the, constantly. And I'm constantly checking in, like how's it going, like is it right, and so I think thinking to me is slow. It's mechanical. So until just when I was putting my kids through and getting the essay, having them do SATs and a lot of testing, there's a way to frame. It's all in the framing of the questions and how you prepare. So I don't think any of that matters. Sometimes you have to do it for if you want to do this. In my daughter's case,
Get by in this society,
she
yeah.
got a full ride to Wellesley. She got a full ride to Wellesley. It's $250,000 ride to college, right?
Hmm.
You got to take the test. Just to prepare them for the test. But
Yeah.
in my world, and I've taught my kids too, they're very intuitive, they're very connected, they're very thoughtful, and um, thinking is just overrated. I think intuition is so much faster, so
And
much faster. And I
it
think
appears,
an increasingly complex world, being
yeah.
accurate and agile is sort of job one.
Yeah. And I think from what Dr. Wilson, Amos Wilson is saying, and I'm glad you say that, because a lot of times, especially now as I work, we do the work that we're doing, I'll just say it feels right. Like they'll ask you why are you saying that? Why? I'm like, damn it, it just feels right.
Right,
It
right.
feels right. Like the person is right. Western culture is very much wanting to know why. Who was your resource? Who else has done this? Like, no, my spirit just feels right with this.
Alignment, right? So moving out of alignment is so much faster than moving out of mechanics, right? It's like there is a way to move in, like where the heart and the mind, everything is coordinated, right? And your results can become some that not only can you get them faster, but they are also truer, and you don't have to backpedal and go and redo them.
Mhm.
Alignment and choosing from alignment, that's why getting this vehicle clarified and directed and intentional is job one, because then you go out in the world and you're not fighting everything all the time. You're just you do it, boom, you're doing it, boom, you're doing it. Yeah, and it creates a momentum. It creates an upward spiral. But so alignment first.
Yeah. And I like how Dr. Amos Wilson is saying this is something I'm teaching my kids now. You're not going to school just to get a job or get a high paycheck. You're going to school to learn a skill that you will use to serve your community. So
Mhm.
I do hope that we as Africans seek intelligence that is about solving our needs, our problems, bettering our environment. It goes back to the Nguzo Saba, right? In Kwanzaa. What we do, the actions we take, how we use our brain, how we be our full self
Mhm.
should be all based on how we improve our lives collectively, how we
Mhm.
leave the world that we found in a better place than we found it.
Mm-hmm.
And one last question, spirit connection, great explanation. Yes. One last question that we had, and I think you talked to this, you spoke to this. Would you agree? Yes, you did, but would you agree anger is a mindset open to change, be it positive or not?
I'm not sure if I understand that question.
I think this is when you were talking about, this is literally the whole conversation we've had in a nutshell.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you, the process you said with me, the little exercise we had, uh, how are you feeling, right? Describe the anger in
Mm-hmm.
yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Give it a 1 to 10, put it in a
Mm-hmm.
box, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do the exercise, put it in front of you, put it behind you, to your side, and
Mm-hmm.
then spin it,
Mm-hmm.
not letting it control you. So
Correct.
of us who are reactionary, the anger will a lot of times lead us not to do to a negative action, right? If we have no control of it, and if our mindset, again, you were saying it is how you think of your environment than what than how your environment is. So yes, you're in a place where, for example, and I hate to be this extreme, um no, let me not go that extreme. That's a bit extreme right now. Um, you're in a place where you constantly go to work. You're not given a raise. You're constantly working hard. I remember Fanny Lou Hamer tells a story when she was a child. She asks her mom why white people keep being the ones who are getting good things when they don't work as hard as black people do. Right? You're constantly in that environment where you're working so hard, but you're getting the least. How
Mm-hmm.
do you not get consumed by that? And how do you find peace there? It goes back again to what I was saying in when I go back home in Kenya in the village. They're still happy despite all the challenges.
Mm-hmm. You know, and again, it's going to sound counterintuitive and a little bit like magic because, again, I think, and I've coached a lot of people at every step of the corporate and municipal ladder, nonprofit
Mhm,
world. I've coached, you name it, I've coached it. Truck drivers to CEOs,
mhm,
and and I've certainly been brought into environments where for Black people, right, that were
mhm.
struggling in their environment with all of the racism and stuff. But
Yeah.
I found that when we took off their struggle goggles, they had a clearer path of how to navigate it. You can't navigate even the racism if you're triggered.
No, you cannot.
You can't. You have to
And it's
be
very consuming from experience.
clear, very consuming. It becomes our identity. And so I'm not saying that that doesn't exist in the terrain. It does. I've coached people navigating that terrain. All I'm saying is that when you are clearer and more neutral inside, how you
Mhm,
show up in those negotiations is completely different than when you are a walking, living, breathing reaction to your lived experience in being a Black person on planet Earth. We have to let some of the more wounded parts of our identity go to
mhm.
be able to connect and navigate more powerfully. And it works. I mean, I've had people just kind of leap and navigate and do stuff once they got clear inside. I cannot explain enough how important the inner clarity is for creating your reality, even when it seems like that's not possible.
Yeah.
But it's this. It's this. It's not that. It's
So, to everyone who's going to listen to us today, go find your inner clarity, especially to our African brothers and sisters. Go find your inner clarity, heal yourself so that you can join us and we can join hands as healed people to do the work with more clarity. To you, Veronica, as we head out, what is your question for our next guest? What question
mm,
should we ask them?
for your next guest.
Not knowing who they are, by the way, right?
Right,
And
right, right. No, so let me just feel into that. I don't know why this is coming to me, but what is your strategy for helping the African on Earth remember that they are gods?
oh, And you know what? You don't know who our next guest is. I do. And I'm going to tell you this is perfect for them.
What, really?
It's just, I can't. This is perfect for them. Perfect. And when we do have, I think we're having it on the 21st, the next conversation, just look out for it. You will see it, and it's hilarious. Um, I love that energy. Like, it literally is a tingling feeling, that
Mm-hmm.
spirituality. And I'm feeling so blessed that I'm reconnecting with my 26th, January 26th. I'm not even going to say the sex because I might reveal it, but it's perfect for this person, the question that you asked. Thank you so much for being with us. I look forward to
Mm-hmm.
working with you. Thank you for the work you're doing. Say hello to your father.
I will.
Tell him we are with him in spirit, and I am glad that he did not take those walls that are holding him back as a way to hold him back. I am
Yeah.
glad that he went beyond the walls and he decided to be in his full African being. And I am going to send all the good energy that he comes back home soon. Um, all the best to you, your
Thank,
family.
thank
Thank you so much, Dr. Veronica, for being with us.
thank you.
Oladile, you're going to be there. Well, you're not coming back to join us. Thank you all for joining us, everyone. Any last words, Veronica?
No, just go forth and be with. Oh, how to connect
Oh,
with me?
yes, I forgot. How do they connect with you? Yes.
Yeah.
Do you have an Instagram? Someone asked.
Yeah. Instagram is Veronica Conway 007.
Oh,
You can connect with me on LinkedIn. My website, I just built a little hub for my where you can kind of see my stuff. Well, you know what you can go to? You can go to beacons.ai, beacons.ai / Veronica Conway.
like that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect. So everyone, there's the link, and the link should lead you to the right destination. But if they follow you on LinkedIn, all that information is there, right? On your page.
Yeah, and I have
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. So all
Well,
the best.
Beacons has all my socials and all that stuff. It has kind of everything. It's like a
I was
hub.
about to say all the best in all the DMs that are going to be coming your way, and responding to them and dealing with them. But we thank you so much, and have a great Sunday.
Thank you. You
All the
too.
best to you. Have a
Thank
good
you.
day.
Thank you to everyone.
Yes, have a good day, everyone. Thank you for being with us.